Hey guys, in this video we're going to be showing the Froggy pose using the newborn nest on the table. So first I'm going to walk through step by step using the cotton doll, and then we'll move on to showing this pose with the real baby. So I'm going to have my nest positioned so that the raised edge is facing the front of the table. And I'm going to put that underneath all of the layers. And it's going to be just right at the front of the table like that. Okay. And I'm going to start by kind of posing baby in my lap first. So I'm going to get her hands up on her face. I feel like her hand is backwards there. Wait, is that supposed to be the thumb? The thumb goes to the back, yeah, okay. She doesn't really have much of a chin, so imagine. Okay, so I have her sitting up in a sitting position in my lap, and I'm going to put her wrists together and her fingers up on her face. Just pretend that this baby has fingers and a chin. And then I have her feet sitting forward in this froggy position like so, and I'm holding on tightly to her, holding her wrists together and also holding on to her entire head with this hand. And then I'm going to lift baby's bottom up and set her bottom right behind that raised part of the nest. She's very flexible. So where I want the elbows to be in this pose is kind of right on the top. This is the very top of the raised side of the nest, and I want her feet directly behind her elbows like this. And her hands are supporting her head, but I'm still holding on to her jaw. I'm holding on to her entire jaw and her hands with this hand here. Okay, so notice how this knee is sticking out a lot further than this knee, and she's kind of wanting to lean this direction. So when baby's a little off center like that, what you need to do is fix her hips so that her back is in a straight line here instead of curved off. It's curved off to my left here. So what I'm going to do here is just pick up on her bottom and scoot it over to my right to straighten out her back, and that brings this knee further out and this knee further in, and now she's more symmetrical and stable. Okay, so we want baby's elbows right on the very top of the nest because we want her looking up at this kind of upward angle, because this is the angle that I'm going to be taking the photo from. And with her angled up this way, we don't have to clip up the backdrop. It can just be laying on the table, and there won't really be any filling in to do up there because of the angle that we're shooting at. So we want those elbows right on the top and the feet right behind to stabilize the elbows. And one thing to look for is if baby's looking too far down or like straight forward like this, the elbows are probably too far into the inside of the nest here. They're kind of on the back side of this raised edge. So what you want to do in that situation is just bring those elbows forward so that they're up on top of the nest, and then feet right behind elbows. And another thing to watch for is the wrists. So when we are taking the main shot, we want those wrists to stay together when we let go of this when we let go of her wrists with this hand. So if baby's hands start sliding up her cheeks when we let go, then the wrists aren't together all the way. So what you're going to do in that situation is just grab onto the cheekbones and pinch the wrists together. And then they won't slide up the cheeks when they're in the correct position. Something else to mention is that we want wrists together, but it doesn't matter if the elbows are together. They can be spread apart like this. They can be together, or they can be spread apart. Sometimes that helps to stabilize a little bit more. And then another thing that you don't want to do, because baby's going to be unstable, is you don't want the hands to be scissored like this, because it's going to be really hard to get them balanced. So we don't want one elbow a lot further forward than the other. You want them kind of on the same plane here. So the other thing to consider here is the positioning of baby's hands. We don't want this, now this is, you're gonna have to use your imaginations here a little bit because she doesn't have a chin. We don't want baby's hands way back, choking her out like this. And we also don't want her hands like sliding forward off of her chin. So the ideal positioning for the hands is to have her pinkies, just pretend she has pinkies, right at the edge of her jawline. So you're using her jaw to kind of stabilize with her hands there. If baby's really wanting to crunch her fingers into her cheeks and doesn't want them flat like this, a little trick is to start with the pinky finger and just uncurl one at a time. The pinky finger is usually the easiest one to get to uncurl, and then usually the rest will follow as long as baby's relaxed enough. So to shoot this pose, we're always going to shoot this as a composite because we never want to take our hands off of baby. So to shoot the main photo of the composite, that's going to be where I have my hand on top of her head, and then I'm going to let go with my right hand, pick up my camera, get this bottom shot. The bottom shot is the main photo from this pose. And after I've got my bottom shot, we're going to switch hands, try to not move baby at all as much as possible, keep her in the same exact position because that's going to just make your composites so much easier. And then we're going to take the top of the head shot. From this shot, all you're going to be doing is compositing in her head, right, the very top of her head where my hand was. So one other thing that I want to mention right here is the reasoning that we have our light on the right when we're shooting at the table is because we self-spot Froggy. So when my hand is up here like this and I'm shooting with my right hand, if we had the light on the left side of the table, we'd get a big shadow right across baby's entire body. So we don't want that, so we always shoot with our light on the right side of the table for this pose.
this video with a quick tutorial on how to do the Froggy pose composite in Photoshop. So I always start with the bottom half of the Froggy, the part where you see the hands and the arms and your hand is only covering the top of baby's head. I just find this to be easier because this way I'm only compositing in this area where your hand is covering. So we start with this image open in Photoshop, and I'm gonna go to Finder and just pull in that top half photo, just drag it right on. That just places it as a smart object. And I'm gonna bring my opacity down to, you know, somewhere around 50%, just so you can see both layers. And just kind of move that around, rotate it, resize it a tiny bit if you have to. I know she moved a little bit in between the top and bottom parts of the photos, so it's not perfect, but you always want to aim to get it as perfect as you can. But that looks pretty good to me, right about there. And we can mess around with it some more after I start compositing it in too. So I'm just gonna hit enter to place that. And then we wanna put a layer mask on this top layer. And then we're gonna bring the opacity back up to 100. And then select the layer mask and invert it so that it's black instead of white. I just use Command I to do that, or Control I if you're on a PC. And I have my brush tool selected. And right now I think it's at 100% hardness. I don't want that. So we're gonna bring that down to 0 hardness and 100% opacity, and change the brush to white here, and just kind of brush over where Lindsay's hand was. And you want to make sure to get any shadows that are being caused by the hand too, just so that the lighting looks correct. And that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna go with that for now. Merge those layers down, and as you can see, we got really close to the back of the backdrop here. I usually like to shoot down a little bit more, but I know this baby was kind of over it at this point, and we didn't quite have her looking up as much as we like to, so we got really close here with this line almost going through the top of her head. So to fix that, I'm going to use our paint on backdrop action in our one-click seamless fix action set. I'm just going to play that, and I'm going to select a color of the drop that I kind of just want to fill in the backdrop with, and just paint on that area. And it won't paint over her head at all. It'll just kind of isolate her, as you can see from the mask down here. And I'm just gonna keep this layer here for a second because I wanna just even out the backdrop a little bit more, the shadows and the wrinkle here. I'm gonna take my opacity and bring it down to, I don't know, like around 20% or so, like not too light, but, and then just sample an area of the drop to kind of just even out the drop, paint over the shadowy areas, paint over the highlights that you don't want. Now, what this does sometimes, and it kind of didn't really isolate her perfectly here, as you can see, I painted over her foot. So we can select the mask and put a black brush on and bring up the opacity of the brush and just kind of paint off where we don't want that purple. All right, that looks pretty good to me, before and after. I'm gonna merge that down again, and I'm gonna fix one more thing about the backdrop, or her placement on the backdrop. As you can see, there is a little bit more negative space in front of the baby than up here on top of the baby. I don't like that. I think it kind of creates this illusion that baby's floating, your eyes don't really know where to go. I like to have the baby really grounded in the frame, really just kind of less negative space in the front than on the top. So I'm going to just take the crop tool and nudge her down a little bit until I get her right where I want her. You can also nudge her over a little bit. We can kind of do a little bit of a rule of thirds framing here. And up here where it says fill on your crop tool, make sure you have content aware fill selected there, and then hit that check mark, and it should content aware the backdrop.
All right, guys, that's it for the Froggy pose. Thanks for watching. We'll link everything that we used for props and equipment in the description below. Leave us a comment if you have any questions. Make sure you like and subscribe for more nerdy content. See you soon.